Good evening. We are Justus Haucap,
Alexander Rasch,
Stiebale.
and we work at the Düsseldorf Institute for Competition Economics, DICE, at the University of Düsseldorf, and want to report on our paper on mergers and innovation. Mergers and innovation have been quite a topical issue in recent times, given that some mergers in high-tech and pharmaceutical industries, such as Bayer Monsanto or Pfizer Hospira, have caused concerns with competition agencies that mergers may not only affect price and quantities, but also affect the incentives for innovation. There hasn't been surprisingly little literature so far on the effect of mergers and innovation. There has been some literature on how concentration affects innovation in generally, but there hasn't been very little really detailed analysis of how mergers affect them. And we think this is quite an interesting field of study, because mergers not only affect innovation of the merged entity, this is well known, but also of rivals in the relevant market. And there are, by and large, two contrasting views of the world. Either the rivals may fill in the R&D that is not conducted by the merged entity, or the competitive dynamic in the market may suffer and all firms may reduce their R&D levels.
and to guide the empirical analysis, we set up a simple three-firm model where three firms compete in prices and are differentiated. There's two larger firms which are rather efficient in R&D, and there's a less efficient smaller firm, and one of the efficient firms merges with the less efficient firms. And what we see is that we have a classic business stealing effect, which means that if there's only two firms in the market, there's a smaller business stealing effect because you can take less demand away from your competitor. On the other hand, if the merged entity has a greater return to investment from R&D, which is R&D enhancing. And what we show is that in research-intensive industries, both the merged entity and the competitor may invest less in R&D.
To test our hypothesis, we construct a unique data set of European mergers in the pharmaceutical industry. A very interesting feature of European merger reports is that they contain an expert market definition for each case, including the identity of rival firms. We use this merger data to match balance sheet data and data on R&D expenditures and patent indicators from various sources. From these sources, we also construct a control group of firms with similar characteristics to those firms affected by mergers, which have been active in other markets where no mergers have taken place. And what we find is that in the years before the merger, the trajectories of merging firms and the non-affected firms are very similar, but they diverge substantially after merger. And there's a reduction in the merged entity of more than 30% in the first 5 years after merger. And this is also true for the rival firms. We see a significant and economically large effect that is a little bit smaller than for the merged entities. Most importantly, we find that this reduction in innovation activity stems from patent technology classes in which both the acquirer and the target and also the non-merging rivals have been active in the pre-merger period. So innovation is reduced precisely in those markets where there's a reduction in competition due to the merger. And we also find that this effect is particularly large in R&D intensive markets, which is consistent with the predictions of our theoretical model.